Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to the Holistic Healing Podcast. This is an exploration to understand more about the mind-body connection and learn how to bring more happiness and joy and fulfillment into our lives. I'm so excited and grateful that you're joining me on this journey. This podcast is sponsored by Blake Suzella's Holistic Counseling and Ryan Kopiar Holistic Healing.
Today I have a very special guest with me, Dr. James Greenblatt, author of an absolutely tremendous book called Finally Focused, the breakthrough natural treatment plan for ADHD that restores attention, minimizes hyperactivity, and helps to eliminate drug side effects. Dr. Greenblatt, thank you so much for your time today.
Ryan, my pleasure. It's good to be with you.
So just give the listeners a little bit of a background about yourself and how you got into the medical field.
Sure. I've been practicing child and adolescent psychiatry for almost 30 years now. I went into medicine with an interest in natural medicine and didn't think meds were needed and was just going to cure everything with, brown rice and kale. And as I became more involved in medicine, I realized the value of an integrative approach, being able to help the children and adults struggling with mental illness, looking at natural nutritional approaches first, but medicines if needed. And it's been a part of my practice for almost 30 years now.
That's incredible. And your book, Finally Focused, how long ago did you write this?
It came out this year. Been treating ADHD for many years, but the material that we talk about in the book, which we've spoken and treated patients in clinics for these 30 years, we now have very good research, academic science-based research to support some of these nutritional integrative approaches. So that's why I thought it was a good time to write the book, because our skeptics, our scientists, our physicians really can't argue now with the research available.
Sure. I noticed that pretty much with every different topic that you mentioned in the book, not only did you provide some I guess, firsthand research or results, but then science to back it up. So I thought that was tremendous. So let's dive right into it here. The Plusminus treatment plan. How did you first come up with this integrative approach?
I think what's so striking and missing in medicine, but certainly mental health, is the concept of kind of individuality, that even though everyone has a diagnosis of ADHD, there might be different underlying causes. Some are genetic, some are environmental, some are nutritional, some are metabolic. And in mental health, we try to have this kind of one-size-fits-all. You take this pill for depression or this pill for ADHD. So we developed this Plusminus plan as a way to help parents understand some kids, some adults might need more of something, like a nutritional deficiency we're adding. And then minus, could there be something in the environment or a food allergy or toxin or gut bacteria that is contributing to the problem? So it's a way of individualizing the treatment approach.
Excellent. And so obviously that they all work together, all of the different treatments, and some may be needed for some person, whereas it may not be for another. Let me ask you this, as I'm reading through the book, everything you say really seems to make sense. Why do you feel like it took so long for us as a science, as a society, to get to this point? Because when you lay it out, it really seems to make sense and be very simple.
Part of it is the medical training in this country. Nutrition is not talked about at all. Or maybe 10 or 15 minutes or half hour here out of 4 years of training. So the medical model has kind of, over the last 50 years, has really taken out nutrition as part of illness and certainly mental health. So part of it is our training of our doctors, and part of it is the very powerful kind of psychopharmacology or pharmaceutical model that's instilled in medicine that there has to be a drug to treat something. And this nutritional approach, for many, seems too simple. And there are doctors who will say things like there's no research to support it, when in fact there's much research.
Yeah, there was extensive amounts of research that you had referenced in the book. So the first topic that I want to touch on is magnesium. Can you explain to the listeners why magnesium is so important, as well as which type of magnesium, in your experience, works the best?
Sure. Magnesium is a good place to start, and it's actually the first chapter of the book because it's one of the few things that we talk about where almost every individual with ADHD, child, adolescent, or adult, would benefit from. So it's an essential mineral that's involved in over 300 enzymes, many in the brain, throughout the body, and it's a very common nutritional deficiency. It's common, one, because it's not in our soil. We don't kind of put it back. And two, we lose magnesium more under stress. So simple stress causes this depletion of magnesium. And I believe those with ADHD have a unique genetic, although we don't have anything proving it, a higher need for magnesium. So every child that we've tested over 30 years is magnesium deficient, and adding magnesium as part of their treatment program, either with or without medications, they have improved sleep, less activity, and sometimes improvement in impulse control.
Excellent. And which type of magnesium, Dr. Greenblatt, do you feel is best absorbed by the body, or has the most positive effect with the client?
I think the simplest way is the opposite. The kind of magnesium I would not use is the most common in the drugstore is magnesium oxide, because most of that is not absorbed, and that's what we use for laxatives. So loose stools is a very common side effect, and you don't get much magnesium. So any of the other forms, glycinate, citrate, sulfate, threonate is a new one. Any of those are appropriate and can be helpful.
Is it true that magnesium threonate is the only form of magnesium that is able to cross the blood-brain barrier, or is that misconception?
No, it's a little marketing hype because it's a new supplement. We've been using magnesium for many, many years with improvement in a host of symptoms, and as you said, many research to support it without magnesium threonate. So there is some new research. Magnesium threonate does cross the blood-brain barrier, perhaps a little easier, but most forms of magnesium will result in improvement in symptoms.
Okay, very good. So as I'm reading through the book and you're sharing these stories of, the children that you've helped, and then kind of giving the backstory of what had prompted the parents to come to you, in almost every single story, it said that the ADHD medication that they were prescribed actually made them more aggressive, as well as, certain tics to either form or get worse. Is that very common in your experience, where somebody may be given the medication and it actually makes certain parts of the disorder, the negative aspects, even worse?
It's certainly a subset. I wouldn't say the majority, but the subset of kids, anywhere from 10 to 30% that do not respond to the stimulants and actually have significant side effects. And that's the group of kids we've been seeing, because the stimulants do help. The question is, it doesn't get at the underlying cause, and it's just a Band-Aid. And then the child tends to need it for many, many years. The causes of kids that have poor reactions to stimulants or get worse, as you described, are outlined in the book. And one is very high copper levels, which can be tested for. And the other is a kind of gut bacteria problem, where there's an abnormal metabolite or chemical that's produced from bacteria in the gut that causes a reaction with with the stimulants to cause an increase in side effects.
And that was getting right into my next question, which was neurogastronology. You spoke about that in the book. It was extremely, really caught my attention. It's something that up until recently I had never even heard that word. Is this something new, or is this something that's been around time where we've understood the relationship between the gut and the brain?
Well, we've understood it for many years as a fact. We always thought the brain affected the gut, in terms of symptoms. But now the science has exploded across many fields that the gut affects the brain and the gut bacteria in particular. So it's a fascinating field. That the good news for us in the integrative medicine world is that traditional medicine has kind of really pushed the research, and it's a very wide spectrum of individuals studying this. A simple concept is that many people aren't aware is that the bacteria in our gut is essentially a different organ system. There are 4 to 5 pounds of bacteria in our gut, trillions and trillions of bacteria, and they have genetic material, and they're producing chemicals. And what's called a dysbiosis, abnormal relationship of some of the bacteria can produce chemicals that we can detect in the blood and the urine. And these chemicals have effects on the central nervous system to make someone more anxious, more relaxed, and contribute to some of these symptoms of ADHD.
There was a line that you talked about in the book which completely blew my mind, where you said that there is actually certain situations where the gut can produce more neurotransmitters than the brain. Can you speak about that?
Certainly, yes. The neurotransmitter serotonin, which we talk about for the treatment of depression and impulse control and ADHD, that there's more. The vast majority of serotonin in the body is actually produced by the gut. And so any medicines that we give or any time we talk about serotonin, we have to remember that the vast majority is produced in the GI tract, not in the brain.
And is this something that we've always known, or it's more recent studies that have come out with this that's made our community aware of this?
We used to call it the second brain. So the gut has so much neurological tissue with all those neurotransmitters. We knew it was important, but what kind of has exploded over the past 10 years is how it affects health, physical health, diabetes, arthritis, allergies, as well as mental health, ADHD and anxiety and eating disorders in particular.
So for the listeners out there that maybe feel like perhaps they have some issues with their stomach or their gut that may be multiplying or magnifying some of the issues that they're facing in regards to mental health, and I know this is kind of brushing broad strokes, but are there certain warning signs, or aside from the blood test, which obviously you speak about in the book, are there certain warning signs or certain complaints where somebody listening could say, hey, I need to keep a lookout for these things, and if I have them, maybe it's time to go get my certain blood levels checked or urine sample tested?
Well, I think the most obvious is just kind of chronic GI problems, irritable bowel symptoms, and as the most common. But I think what we're finding and what's kind of revolutionary now is some individuals have no GI symptoms. Their only symptoms might be, the ADHD or the anxiety, and we're finding probiotics, so high-dose probiotics that one can get at the health food store can actually treat some of those mental health conditions, and we have research looking at ADHD and how probiotics can help kids and adults with ADHD.
Absolutely incredible. And so I want to segue off of that into the next topic, because this line certainly stood out to me. Gluten and casein, as it relates to your analogy to morphine. Boy, anybody reading the book, that's gonna jump off the page at them. Can you explain to the listeners a little bit more of what you're referring to in that chapter?
Sure. I think a lot of people looking for alternatives to medication, they just kind of jump on a gluten-free diet or a dairy-free diet because they read somewhere or someone told them that's going to help ADHD. And my position is not everyone needs to be gluten-free, not everyone needs to be dairy-free. But there are tests now that we have where we can predict some individuals that are sensitive to dairy or gluten. One of them is a food allergy test. But the other one that you mentioned is even more dramatic. It's not being able to break down the protein in dairy, and that's called casein. We've all heard of that. You can see it in the cheese and the dairy, and it's a protein, and our body breaks it down to amino acids. And when the body uses those amino acids to build proteins and muscles and hair and things like that. But if you're missing an enzyme to break it down completely, this is a zinc-dependent enzyme, then you have these little pieces of the casein, and it's called casomorphine because it's chemically, structurally very similar to morphine in the brain. And so you don't break down the dairy completely. You have this casomorphine, which we can detect in the urine, and it crosses the blood-brain barrier, and you have symptoms. You can be anxious, you can be fatigued, you can be inattentive, and if we detect that, we can treat it. And those are the kids that we recommend a dairy-free diet, or we can give the missing enzyme. But it's a very simple, rarely tested chemical that can make a huge difference in some of these young kids with ADHD.
There were so many times throughout the book where, I'm reading and I'm like, hey, wow, that makes sense, and when I saw casein, it particularly stood out to me because I have a lot of experience and work in the fitness and wellness industry, and casein is actually a type of protein recommended. You can purchase that in the store as a slow digestive protein to take, before you go to bed. So it was amazing to me that somebody could be taking that protein, or like you said, eating a lot of cheese or dairy, and if they, for whatever reason, don't have the necessary, biological or neurological makeup to break that down, it could be causing them harm. It was just, wow, that was certainly astounding to me. In your research and your experience, what percentage of people are susceptible to this with either gluten or casein?
Well, it's a great question, and we don't have any research. I think there's probably a small percentage, 10-20%, to normal amounts in their diet. But if you start increasing your casein, if you're drinking milk 3 times a day and cheese and these shakes, then you're going to kind of overload this enzyme. Since you mentioned the bodybuilding supplements, I've had many cases, some really severe, where some young adults started taking these bodybuilding supplements and severe exacerbation of underlying psychiatric problems. And we tested them, they had high casomorphine. So what I share is that, the bodybuilding supplements that have, the protein, the pure whey protein, are much better than those that just add casein, because casein is cheap. And those are the ones where I've seen problems.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, that kind of all ties it in together. So what, our listeners, obviously, where can they purchase the book besides Amazon?
It's at all, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and are the most common. Our website is finallyfocusedbook.com, and we try to, help both professionals learn how to treat ADHD, and parents and patients kind of wrote the book so they could follow things on their own.
Absolutely. So to any of our listeners out there, I highly, highly recommend the book. It was a very easy read for me. It made sense. It was very well written. I felt like you were just speaking, like I was sitting in your office and you were speaking to me. So very, very, very well written book, extremely educational. For the listeners or anybody perhaps in the Massachusetts area, that's correct? That's where you are, Dr. Greenblatt?
Yes. We're in Massachusetts, and we opened up a clinic to kind of help parents that are looking for some help in the New England area.
If anybody wants to get in touch with you or learn more about what it is that you do you offer any seminars, or have you thought about doing any seminars?
Yeah, on the webpage, there's a listing of a conference that we did, so some videos from the conference, and we're setting up a professional training course in January, so some online trainings. So we're very committed to educating both patients and professionals.
The stories that you shared or the lines from some of the emails that were written were absolutely incredible. And I can just imagine how powerful that is with how many lives you've helped and changed and made a positive impact on. I love how you started out the book just sharing a line about what a tremendous impact that you've made. Parents sending you emails saying about how much you've helped their children. That's just so powerful. So I respect you so very much for that. And, coming out with the book, I think was absolutely incredible. And thank you so very much for doing that. I think that your approach is so needed right now in a society where it seems like for so many different things, our first course is to, well, I have this problem. What medication can I take? So have the utmost respect for you, Dr. Greenblatt. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Ryan. I appreciate being able to get the word out to individuals struggling with ADHD.
If our listeners want to contact you either by email or phone, which would be the best way for them to reach out to you?
Probably at finelyfocusedbook.com. There's a contact us section where we'd be happy to help or get back to anyone with any questions.
Great. One last thing, Dr. Greenblatt, what message do you have now to all of the parents out there listening, that maybe are frustrated, feeling down, feeling overwhelmed, feeling hopeless? What message do you want to be able to send to them?
Well, I think the most important is where we started, that everybody's different, and ADHD is so easily understood with an integrative approach that medicine is not the enemy, supplements are not, quackery, that an integrative approach, your child or your spouse or friend really can get the treatment that they need, and the approach in the Finally Focused book kind of outlines both the nutritional and the medication approach, and everybody's different. That's the most important message I have.
Terrific. Okay. So, Dr. Greenblatt, thank you so much again for your time. Listeners, Finally Focused, the breakthrough natural treatment plan for ADHD, restores attention, minimizes hyperactivity, and helps to eliminate drug side effects. Dr. Greenblatt, thank you so very much for your time today.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so very much for your time today. And again, remind you that this podcast is sponsored by Blake Suzeles, Holistic Counseling, and Ryan Kopiar, Holistic Healing.